Welcome to Perspective, where we share inspiring stories of great leaders, changemakers, and visionaries who shape the world. Our goal is to motivate, uplift, and empower you to lead with purpose and passion. Today, we journey through the life of one of the most iconic figures in history, Nelson Mandela, a man who taught the world the power of forgiveness, resilience, and standing up for what is right. Mandela's fight for freedom and equality not only transformed South Africa but became a beacon of hope for oppressed people everywhere. Join us as we explore the inspiring story of his life, struggles, and triumphs. The life and legacy of Nelson Mandela, a journey to freedom. Introduction for the Nelson Mandela. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, a name synonymous with the struggle for freedom, peace, and equality. But who was the man behind the legend? Today, we dive deep into the life of Nelson Mandela, from his humble beginnings to becoming South Africa's first black president and a global icon for justice. Nelson Mandela, early life and background. Nelson Mandela, born on July 18, 1918, in Imvezo, a small village in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. The name Nelson was later added by one of his teachers. His mother was Nonkafi Nosekeni and his father was Kosi Mpakanyiswa Gadla Mandela, principal counselor to the acting king of the Thembu people, Jongantaba Dalindyebo. Nelson Mandela's early primary school attended a Methodist missionary school in Transkei, where he was given the name Nelson by his teacher, Miss Mdingane. Secondary school matriculated at Healdtown Methodist Boarding School, where he completed his junior certificate in 2 years. Nelson Mandela began studying at university in 1939 at the University of Fort Hare, where he graduated in 1942 with a BA. In Johannesburg he enrolled at the University of the Witwatersrand, and then when he was imprisoned in 1962 he started studying with London University. The first taste of activism by Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela's activism began in the early 1940s, during a transformative period in his life. After moving to Johannesburg in 1941, Mandela encountered the harsh realities of apartheid for the first time. He was working as a law clerk when he met Walter Sisulu, a key figure in the African National Congress, ANC, who would become his mentor and introduce him to the world of political activism. Mandela, deeply influenced by the racial injustices he witnessed in Johannesburg, soon became involved in the fight against the institutionalized racial segregation enforced by apartheid. In 1943, Mandela formally joined the African National Congress, ANC, marking his first step into organized activism. At that time, the African National Congress was primarily focused on negotiating with the apartheid government, but Mandela and other young activists believed that more direct action was needed. To push for more radical change, Mandela co-founded the African National Congress Youth League, ANCIL, in 1944 alongside figures like Oliver Tambo and Anton Lembede. The Youth League advocated for mass protests, civil disobedience, and boycotts, aiming to mobilize ordinary black South Africans in the fight against apartheid. Apartheid and the struggle for justice. Apartheid, the system of institutionalized racial segregation, was officially enacted in South Africa in 1948 when the National Party came to power. This oppressive regime was designed to maintain white supremacy and segregate the country's population by race. Under apartheid, black South Africans were denied basic rights, including the right to vote, own land in white designated areas, and access quality education, healthcare, and jobs. The system controlled nearly every aspect of life, enforcing laws that restricted where people could live, work, and travel. Defiance Campaign, 1952. The Defiance Campaign of 1952 was Nelson Mandela's first major involvement in large-scale, organized resistance against apartheid. It was the African National Congress's, ANC, response to the intensifying racial segregation laws imposed by the apartheid government. This campaign marked a significant shift in the ANC's strategy, moving from passive resistance to mass civil disobedience, and was the first large-scale, non-violent resistance movement against apartheid. The campaign was spearheaded by Mandela, who was appointed National Volunteer-in-Chief, a role that required him to organize and mobilize people across the country to deliberately break apartheid laws. The Defiance Campaign specifically targeted the 6 unjust laws that enforced apartheid, including the requirement for black South Africans to carry passbooks, identity documents, laws restricting movement, and segregationist policies that barred black people from entering whites-only areas. Mandela and his fellow activists called for mass non-violent defiance of these laws. Protesters entered prohibited areas, refused to carry their passbooks, and defied curfews. Thousands of ordinary South Africans responded to the call, making it the first coordinated effort to confront apartheid through civil disobedience. The campaign was met with harsh repression from the apartheid government. Thousands of protesters were arrested, including Mandela himself, who was detained multiple times. Despite the arrests and suppression, the campaign was a pivotal moment in South Africa's liberation struggle. Although the apartheid regime did not immediately repeal the laws, the Defiance Campaign had several important outcomes. It increased the visibility of the anti-apartheid movement, both within South Africa and internationally, and significantly boosted membership in the ANC. For Mandela, the campaign was a turning point in his activism, cementing his leadership role within the ANC and bringing him to the attention of both the apartheid authorities and the global community. The Defiance Campaign demonstrated the power of mass mobilization and set the tone for future resistance efforts, while also teaching Mandela important lessons about the need for greater organization and strategy in the fight against apartheid. In 1956, Nelson Mandela and 155 other anti-apartheid activists were arrested and charged with treason by the apartheid government. This mass arrest came in response to the drafting of the Freedom Charter in 1955, which called for a non-racial, democratic South Africa and was seen as a subversive threat by the regime. The trial, known as the Treason Trial, dragged on for nearly 5 years, with Mandela and his co-accused facing the possibility of severe punishment. However, in 1961, they were all acquitted after the prosecution failed to prove their involvement in a conspiracy to overthrow the state through violence. Although they were cleared of these charges, the trial highlighted the apartheid regime's determination to crush opposition and marked a turning point for Mandela and the African National Congress, ANC. Imprisonment on Robben Island. Nelson Mandela's imprisonment on Robben Island is one of the most iconic aspects of his life and his struggle against apartheid. After being sentenced to life imprisonment during the Rivonia trial in 1964, Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a notorious prison off the coast of Cape Town, where he would spend the next 18 years of his life in harsh conditions. Robben Island was reserved for political prisoners and those considered especially dangerous to the apartheid regime. The island had a reputation for its brutal conditions and isolation, designed to break the spirit of its inmates. Mandela, along with other anti-apartheid leaders, was housed in a small, damp cell measuring just 7 by 9 feet, with nothing more than a mat on the floor to sleep on. For much of his time there, he was denied basic human comforts, including a bed or proper sanitary facilities. The prison regime sought to strip prisoners of their dignity and subject them to hard labor. Mandela and other prisoners were forced to work in a lime quarry under the hot sun, performing back-breaking labor without adequate protection, which led to Mandela suffering from long-term damage to his eyesight. Communication with the outside world was strictly limited. Prisoners were allowed only a few letters and visitors per year, and these were often heavily censored. Mandela's family life, too, was profoundly affected by his incarceration. His wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, also endured repression, harassment, and imprisonment, and Mandela's children grew up without their father. Despite these hardships, Mandela remained mentally strong, committed to the cause of ending apartheid. His refusal to be broken by the system became a source of inspiration for others, both inside and outside South Africa. During his years on Robben Island, Mandela became a symbol of resistance, both domestically and internationally. Though isolated, Mandela continued to play a leadership role. Within the prison, he and other political prisoners, including Walter Sisulu and Govan Mbeki, turned Robben Island into what became known as the University of Robben Island. Mandela and his comrades educated each other, debating political strategy, history, and philosophy. They also secretly organized to maintain the unity of the prisoners and resist the dehumanizing tactics of the prison authorities. Outside the prison, Mandela's name grew in prominence. The global anti-apartheid movement gained momentum during his years on Robben Island, and Free Nelson Mandela became a rallying cry for activists around the world. The apartheid regime's attempts to silence Mandela only enhanced his stature as the face of the anti-apartheid struggle. In 1980, the ANC launched an international campaign for his release, and calls for his freedom became a unifying force in the global fight against apartheid. By the 1980s, as pressure mounted on the apartheid regime, Mandela's imprisonment began to symbolize the broader fight for liberation in South Africa. Despite his physical isolation, Mandela remained in communication with the ANC leadership and the resistance movement. In 1982, Mandela and a few other leaders were transferred from Robben Island to Pollsmoor Prison, a move by the government to isolate them from the younger generation of activists on the island. However, Mandela's symbolic presence as the leader of the anti-apartheid movement remained strong. Mandela's years on Robben Island were critical in shaping his leadership. The prison provided him time to reflect on strategy and leadership, and when he eventually emerged from prison in 1990, Mandela was not only the figurehead of the anti-apartheid movement but also a symbol of perseverance, resilience, and reconciliation. His ability to endure 27 years of imprisonment, with 18 of those on Robben Island, without losing his resolve, became a testament to his leadership and his commitment to the principles of justice and equality. Release from prison and the road to presidency. Nelson Mandela after 1990. Nelson Mandela's release from prison on February 11, 1990, after 27 years behind bars, marked a turning point not only in his personal life, but also in South Africa's history. His release symbolized the beginning of the end for the apartheid regime, ushering in a new era of negotiations and hopes for a democratic South Africa. As Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, now Drakenstein Correctional Center, hand in hand with his then-wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, he was greeted by thousands of cheering supporters and millions of people worldwide who had fought and campaigned for his freedom. His release was a product of both internal resistance to apartheid and growing international pressure on the South African government to end its system of institutionalized racial segregation. In the years leading up to his release, apartheid was facing a deepening crisis. Internally, mass protests, strikes, and resistance movements had made the country increasingly ungovernable, while internationally, South Africa faced sanctions and diplomatic isolation. Under these conditions, the government, led by President F.W. de Klerk, began to realize that apartheid could no longer be sustained. De Klerk made the historic decision to unban the African National Congress, ANC, and other political organizations, paving the way for Mandela's release. Mandela's freedom did not come with immediate peace or stability, but it opened the door for dialogue between the ANC and the apartheid government. After his release, Mandela quickly resumed his leadership role in the ANC and became the central figure in negotiations to dismantle apartheid and establish a multiracial democracy. One of his first speeches, delivered on the day of his release, reflected his enduring commitment to the cause. He reiterated that the fight for freedom was not over and that the struggle for a free and equal South Africa would continue until true liberation was achieved. His focus, however, was now on peaceful negotiations, a path he had been considering during his later years in prison. Although he had co-founded the ANC's armed wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, Mandela now emphasized the importance of dialogue and reconciliation. Over the next few years, Mandela led the ANC in delicate negotiations with the apartheid regime. These talks were fraught with tension, as South Africa remained deeply divided along racial lines, with violence breaking out in many parts of the country. The period between 1990 and 1994 was marked by political instability, massacres, and assassinations, as factions opposed to the democratic transition, particularly the white far right and certain factions within the black community, sought to derail the process. Mandela's leadership during this tumultuous time was critical in steering the country toward peace and unity. He worked tirelessly to bring different political factions to the negotiating table and often served as a mediator between conflicting parties. In 1991, Mandela was elected president of the ANC, taking over from Oliver Tambo, who had led the organization in exile. Under Mandela's leadership, the ANC worked with other anti-apartheid groups to craft a vision for a post-apartheid South Africa. These efforts culminated in the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, a multi-party negotiation process that began in late 1991 and aimed to create a framework for the country's political future. Mandela's ability to remain firm yet flexible in negotiations helped build consensus for the transition to democracy. Despite many setbacks, including the collapse of the initial talks and increased violence, Mandela remained committed to a peaceful solution. Mandela's most profound achievement during this period was his commitment to reconciliation, not retribution. He recognized that for South Africa to move forward, it could not be divided by vengeance or hatred. This was particularly clear after the assassination of Chris Hani, a popular anti-apartheid leader, in 1993. Hani's murder threatened to plunge the country into further chaos, but Mandela's calm and decisive leadership helped prevent widespread violence. He called for peace and restraint, showing the world that he was not only a revolutionary leader but also a statesman who could unite a divided nation. In 1993, Mandela and F.W. de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to peacefully end apartheid and create a new democratic South Africa. The award symbolized international recognition of the difficult and ongoing process of transformation in South Africa. Despite their differences, Mandela and de Klerk worked together to ensure a smooth transition of power, with Mandela showing remarkable grace and leadership in navigating the country through this fragile period. South Africa's first free and fair elections were held in April 1994, and they were a historic moment in the country's history. For the first time, black South Africans were able to vote, and millions turned out to cast their ballots. The ANC, under Mandela's leadership, won a decisive victory, securing over 60% of the vote. On May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first black president of South Africa, marking the official end of apartheid and the birth of a new, democratic nation. His inauguration was a global event, attended by leaders from around the world, symbolizing the triumph of justice over oppression. Mandela's presidency was defined by his efforts to heal the wounds of the past and build a united South Africa. One of his first major acts as president was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, which aimed to uncover the crimes of apartheid and provide a platform for victims and perpetrators to come forward in the spirit of truth and forgiveness. Mandela believed that reconciliation, not revenge, was the key to building a peaceful and prosperous South Africa. During his time in office, Mandela also focused on addressing the vast economic and social inequalities that apartheid had left behind. His government worked to improve housing, healthcare, and education for the majority of South Africans, though many challenges remained. Mandela's presidency was also marked by his efforts to promote racial unity, as he famously demonstrated through gestures like supporting the predominantly white Springboks rugby team during the 1995 Rugby World Cup, the move that helped bridge the racial divide in the country. Mandela stepped down after one term in office in 1999, choosing to retire from active politics and hand over the reins to a new generation of leaders. His presidency, while not without its challenges, is widely regarded as a success, particularly in his ability to lead South Africa through a peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy. After leaving office, Mandela continued his work as a global statesman, advocating for peace, human rights, and the fight against HIV/AIDS. His leadership, vision, and unwavering commitment to justice made him not only a hero to South Africans but also a symbol of freedom and reconciliation worldwide. Mandela passed away. Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95, after battling a prolonged illness. His death marked the end of an era and prompted an outpouring of grief and tributes from around the globe, highlighting the profound impact he had on the world. As a central figure in the struggle against apartheid, Mandela left behind a powerful legacy rooted in peace, forgiveness, and the pursuit of equality for all people. He famously stated, "It always seems impossible until it is done," reflecting his belief that change is possible through perseverance and collective action. The event served as a powerful reminder of Mandela's ability to inspire people across generations and cultures, reinforcing the universal principles of justice and compassion that he championed. Mandela's legacy extends far beyond his time in office. He inspired countless individuals and movements around the world, encouraging a commitment to social justice, human rights, and the fight against inequality. His life serves as a testament to the idea that one person's dedication can change the course of history. Mandela's values of tolerance, understanding, and forgiveness continue to resonate, serving as guiding principles for future generations seeking to create a better world. In essence, his legacy is not only a tribute to his accomplishments but also a call to action for all those who strive for justice and equality, reminding us that the work he championed remains as vital today as it was during his lifetime. Mandela Day, celebrated annually on July 18, is a global observance that honors the life, legacy, and values of Nelson Mandela. It was officially declared by the United Nations in 2009, with July 18 being Mandela's birthday. The day is not just a celebration of his remarkable contributions to the world, but also a call to action, encouraging people everywhere to take responsibility for improving their communities and promoting social justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. We hope this video gave you a deeper understanding of his remarkable impact on the world. If you enjoyed this content, please give the video a thumbs up and share it with friends who would also appreciate Mandela's inspiring story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insightful videos about history's greatest leaders and global changemakers. And make sure to hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we upload new content. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What part of Mandela's life story impacted you the most? Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.